Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Thriving Relationships Show. I am your host, Christine Earthhart, founder of the Center for Thriving Relationships. And I am so grateful and excited to have you here and to get to support you in creating an even more loving, connected, inspiring relationship. And I am so thrilled and honored to get to introduce you to today's super special guest. It's globally renowned and beloved for having expertise on the full spectrum of love and relating, from those earliest days of being single and calling in the one to those who are navigating, changing their relationship and consciously uncoupling and beyond and everything in between. She also, her knowledge has not only served so many people, it really started movements and forever changed how people approach otherwise really delicate and emotional times of life. So I have the great joy of introducing you all to Katherine Woodward Thomas, the New York Times bestselling author of Conscious Uncoupling, 5 Steps to living happily even after and calling in the one, 7 weeks to attracting the love of your life, as well as an award-winning licensed marriage and family psychotherapist. Over the past 2 decades, Katherine has taught hundreds of thousands of people from all corners of the globe to create conscious, loving relationships. Katherine's virtual learning communities include the Conscious Uncoupling and Calling in the One Quest with Mindvalley. She also trains and certifies Calling in the One coaches and Conscious Uncoupling coaches, and provides ongoing supervision and development to a vibrant community of coaches from around the world. Katherine is also a Billboard charting #1 iTunes jazz artist with her CD, Lucky in Love, which was co-written and co-produced with the brothers Corin. So welcome, Katherine. It is such a delight to have you here. Thank you so much for your incredible service to humanity and helping people navigate what is otherwise sometimes a very confusing and difficult journey from beginning and until forever.
Thank you. Well, I feel like we're real partners in serving people to find the sweet spot, that safety, creating safety for each other, finding love with each other, and you with your decades-long relationship and you and your husband doing this great work. So it's just an honor for me to be here with you as well.
Thank you so much, Katherine. So it's always so fun to hear what got you into doing this work. And I know it's like different stages of life, gave birth to different things. So anything you want to share about what inspired you to get into Calling in the One and Conscious Uncoupling?
Well, I wrote Calling in the One first back in 2004, and I didn't write it until I was in my 40s. And I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would ever become a relationship expert. I mean, I was a psychotherapist because I'd had a lot of, like many therapists, I had a lot of heartbreak when I was young, a lot of trauma, relational trauma. So I was struggling in love. I had a particular pattern of unavailable people. And so it was kind of one heartache after another. People who were married, always getting into some kind of triangulation. It was either another person or maybe it was drugs and alcohol or workaholism, but there was always some kind of impossible love situation right from the get-go. So I kind of had a PhD in heartache by the time I was, turning 40. And I was particularly disappointed because I had always wanted children and I'd always wanted to be married. I had an unhappy childhood, and I was just heartbroken to not be able to rectify that somehow. I felt very unfair because I'd been healing myself for many, many years by now. I mean, I really just started my healing journey when I was, believe it or not, 14. So I'd been working on myself spiritually and psychologically for a lot of years. But no matter what I did, even though other parts of my life were working, I couldn't get any traction there. And it wasn't until I began working with metaphysical principles. Now, I was on the journey of becoming a psychotherapist. I'd been working with people on that domain for years by this point. But the metaphysics of it, where you're leaning in and you're claiming a future that's kind of unpredictable, unforeseeable for certain, and unreasonable. And you become more oriented towards, well, who would I need to be in order to manifest that future? So I was with some people and they were setting intentions and doubling their income and doing all sorts of things. But I had had a lot of heartbreak. So I just said, well, I'm going to call a friend from that group and I'm going to declare that I'm going to be engaged by my 42nd birthday. That was 8 months out, no prospects for a husband. And I'd been trying to do this for about 20 years by that point. But luckily, she didn't laugh at me when I said that. But she did say something that really radically changed everything for me. She said, Katherine, I'm going to hold that intention with you and for you if you give me permission to hold you accountable for becoming the woman you would need to be in order for that to happen. And so that from that moment, I actually stopped like analyzing who did what to me when and where it happened and how I felt about that, which by that point I'd been doing for a very long time. And I suddenly focused my attention on who I would need to become. So it was a developmental journey now. And I've since really discovered that healing is a different domain than transformation, because transformation is really about letting go of who you've known yourself to be for the possibility of who you might become. It's about risk taking. It's about getting out of your comfort zone. It's about naming the specific areas that you've never actually developed, maybe because of trauma, maybe because you just never saw it was modeled, maybe because it never occurred to you. And also taking profound levels of responsibility for how you are the source of the recurring pattern. Because even though it feels like it's kind of just our fate to be living this story, it feels like it's just our destiny to be unhappy in this particular area. Maybe it's in our astrological chart. The truth is that it's not just happening to us, it's actually happening through us. The choices we're making, the ways we're showing up or not showing up, the ways we're continually generating evidence for the story of the past. I've since discovered that, as a person who did many, many years of work on myself psychologically, that at some point, if you keep going back to try and figure yourself out from a relational perspective, the danger of that is that you could inadvertently keep reinforcing the identity of the I'm not loved, I'm all alone, I'm not safe. And we are generating our lives from wherever we're centered at the level of identity, meaning that we're showing up in ways that covertly pull on people to validate that story and perpetuate that narrative for us. So a big part of the miracle process I was in when I made that, wildly unreasonable declaration was to really explore, without making myself wrong or going back into a psychological explanation, which, oh, by the way, left me victimized by my own unconscious, which was forever showing up with the imprints of the past, to really become curious, like, how am I recreating the aloneness that I felt as a child? And it's actually quite specific. I'm self-sufficient to the extreme. I don't ask for support. I'm much more comfortable giving than receiving. So I don't really let people into my inner world so that they can really show up for me. I get into relationships without the criteria of, even having the expectation that somebody would be there for me. So once you start looking from that perspective, you see all sorts of things. And the wonderful thing about that is that once you see it, you have a new choice to make. That's when things can evolve. So you actually outgrow your story. And I was engaged before my 42nd birthday, married a wonderful man. And that's when I wrote Calling in the One. So that's how I got into it. It's kind of a long explanation, but really it's just one step in front. I really wrote the book Calling in the One because I understood the suffering of highly intelligent, highly developed people, spiritual people, people who are worthy of being loved, who were doing amazing things in the world, but still kept running up against that old pattern. So once I figured it out for myself, I started teaching it to other people. And when it worked for them too, I just thought, okay, well, I need to write a book on this. So it was service. You used the word service. It was an act of service.
So beautiful. Thanks for sharing that journey. And I love that it was, what an amazing thing that our own heartache, gets to be transformed into this incredible gift to humanity. So thanks for following that trail, and what a gift that your friend, reflected that, and that you took her up so fully on that invitation. And, that experience that we've all had of these unconscious stories and beliefs that interfere, not consciously necessarily, of calling in the one, and also when we're in partnership, right? Of really opening to give and receive and experience the kind of love that we consciously long for. And so I'm wondering if you can actually share anything about that. Any of your favorite ways that you love to help people kind of identify, like what are some of those barriers we might have that we don't even know we have, and how do we even begin to move through them?
Well, I really love that question, but I'll tell you what really got me interested in learning about that was that my marriage to Mark did not last forever. It lasted a decade, but it didn't last forever. And when I look back and I reflect on that, first of all, I don't know that, I like to poke holes in our overall assumptions. So I think we all have kind of this collective assumption that relationships need to last a lifetime in order to be viable, or someone did something wrong, or the relationship wasn't ever, real to begin with. I'm not an advocate for that, because the happily ever after myth was really created about 400 years ago, and the lifespan was less than 40. The life conditions were very, very different. It's not the norm for most of us. And I think we need to take some of the shame out of the decision to transition out of a union. So we did get divorced. We had a daughter, and we were able to align upon a shared intention that our daughter have a happy childhood, because, as I said, I did not. And part of that was losing contact with my father as a result of my parents' divorce. And Mark lost contact with his mother as a result of his parents' divorce. So we understood the consequences of how badly this could go. So we were able to join together. We did it very well, very kindly. We were mutually very generous to each other throughout that process, and that became then the foundation for conscious uncoupling. So it was in conscious uncoupling and the reflection that I had on my own deficits or my own assumptions about marriage, what I didn't bring to the marriage, that began answering that question for me, Christine. And as a matter of fact, when I wrote Conscious Uncoupling, I started to take the heat from people saying, well, you're making divorce frivolous. If you take the shame out of divorce, then everyone's going to get divorced casually. So I made a pledge, actually, that I put at the end of the book, which is, and now I'm going to really study what keeps love happy and how to create longevity in love, so that there's, you can really use like conflict to deepen as opposed to damage the relationship and all sorts of things. So the last 10 years, oh, by the way, I am repartnered again, for those of you who are worried about me. So I'm very happily repartnered. This is my sweetheart right here. I have him right here. That's Michael and I.
Oh, darling. He's in purple, my favorite color.
He's really spectacular. And I'm also very good friends with Mark and his new husband. And our daughter is great. She has no trauma from the divorce. She's, kids are struggling now in general. They don't need to struggle with our unfinished business. So it's already hard enough to be 22. So one of the things that I'm really working with is recently I've been looking at through the lens of how to create secure attachment when you have ambivalent attachment, anxious attachment, and or avoidant attachment. And then there's, of course, other degrees, I think, disorganized attachment, when you have the confusion of your early attachment figures were abusive and you needed them desperately and you loved them desperately. So what happens there to people, and how we carry those wounded relational fields into our relationships as adult, and the kind of unhappiness that they create. So when we're talking about secure attachment and helping people to create longevity in love and happiness in love, which can serve as a real foundation for us to kind of spread our wings and be everything that we would hope to become in this lifetime, which is what relationships will do for us. We're really looking at not just, I think when I first heard secure attachment, I thought of those kind of deadened relationships where people were just kind of connected and they were going to stick it out through thick and through thin. But that's not how we're defining secure attachment. Secure attachment is the underlying sense that we are loved and safe here in this connection, so that it's even safe to argue. It's safe to be different. It's safe to have moments of disconnection, safe to be disapproved of, safe to say no and know that you're disappointing the other, safe for the other to say no and disappoint us, because the relationship is fundamentally such a home base and so solid at its very foundation. And people who have secure attachment have very different relational habits than those of us who have insecure or avoidant patterns. And I've read a lot of experts in this field. And when I was launching Conscious Uncoupling, I started to really work on some programs that of how to create secure attachment for people who have had these other patterns, that's not based upon what some of the experts were saying at the time, which is, well, what will help someone who's anxious in their attachment style to become more secure is to be in relationship with a secure person. Now, when I read that, that just drove me crazy, because if you have these, attachment difficulties, you tend to not attract insecure people, or you show up in ways that have a secure person not choose you because they're too healthy to actually choose somebody who's in, out, or, putting up defenses or walls, or putting what we call self-protection above relationship enhancement when there's a breakdown. So I got really curious because, I'm a bit of a rebel at heart. And I said, well, I don't like that. So I don't want to be limited to that, because I know that for me, when I was single, that just wouldn't have gotten me anywhere. So how am I going to really help people here? And so I started to really break it down to really discover what I call the healthy habits of the happily attached that would really make a difference for people who had these insecure patterns. And so obviously, Christine, we have to start with our relationship with ourselves and the ability to hold and contain our own inner experience, and to recognize where we go in consciousness when we feel disappointed, or when we start to even feel our own dependency needs come up, like, oh my gosh, I really need him to call me, kind of dependency needs. Because that's actually where we determine what your attachment style is in the moment where you're disappointed, you feel threatened, and you might even feel threatened by your own need for someone. So it was the healthy needs that come up. I need someone to be there for me. I need someone to see me. I need to be heard. I need to be respected. I need to feel loved. And once we, it's in that need of someone that when we're not certain that that's going to be met with kindness and someone's going to actually meet us there and show up for us, that we start to get anxious, and then we'll just react even there. So I know you do work on that self-love piece too. I'd love to hear what you do to help people.
Oh, well, I am so grateful for you sharing that. And it's just paramount, to to create that kind of secure relationship with ourselves, with our beloved, and also not just look to them, but to know how to be fully with ourselves and all of our feelings and all of our needs, and turn towards the younger parts of us, the present parts of us, the future parts of us, and know how to know that we're gonna, be emotionally available for ourselves, and we're going to respond when emotions come up, and really hold ourselves with so much love and compassion and grace. And so yeah, it's so amazing to me how we can learn to apply relationship tools with another within, by bringing our kind of wiser, loving self, our kind of centered, present self, to, whatever part of us gets scared, in that moment. And so it's like, this relationship is the most important one we have. And then, so I love the mirroring, of how our romantic relationships reflect so much about how our relationship with ourselves is.
Well, I think one of the things that I find with most of us who struggle in love is that we're very unclear about how to be with our needs, what our needs actually are, what the difference between an unhealthy need and a healthy need is. This is so core to most people, most of us who really struggle here. So, we want to talk about what healthy needs are, and to develop a healthy sense of entitlement in getting our needs met. And that always begins with us turning towards our own needs and taking them seriously. Because I find that if other people are dismissing our needs, minimizing our needs, stepping over our needs, it's generally that we've kind of trained them covertly to do that. That's actually our relationship with our own needs as well. Absolutely. So even noticing what your needs are, and the difference between an unhealthy need, or that which we call neediness, which we like, do anything to be not needy. So the difference between that and what it is to really respect the vulnerability of human relationships, and that at the best of relationships are an intuitive guarding and protecting of the needs of each other, a desire to feed each other's needs, to honor each other's needs, to understand the other person's needs, and to recognize our own, and to honor them, and to speak them in a way that someone else can hear. So that needs negotiation. I think it was Pearl S. Buck has this gorgeous quote where she really talks about, and Pearl S. Buck is a wonderful novelist filled with wisdom. Her books are filled with wisdom. And she talks about how the best of marriages are really marriages where both people really intuit the deepest needs of the other, and organically begin to organize around serving those needs. So I define neediness as when we are centered in a fixed, younger part of ourselves. And I say fixed because the narrative that we create when we're young in response to relational trauma is always that same narrative. If you think back to, your deepest wounding in childhood, if you feel the feelings of that in your body, and you invite that part of your body to tell you the I am or the I'm not, you're always going to come up with the I'm not good enough story or the I'm alone story. And you can ask that part of you, sweetheart, how old are you? And we're all kind of like rings on a tree. So we have these kind of fixed parts of us. And it's very important that we get into relationship with that parts of us and begin to unpack the narrative that's there. And then even to challenge the narrative. Sweetheart, you're not alone. I'm right here. Right? Because if you get into neediness, it's really on top of the story, like I'm alone and no one ever shows up for me and I can never get my needs met. So that's a very desperate part of ourselves. It's kind of fixed there. And unless we're in relationship with that part of us, it's very hard to navigate adult needs, to negotiate your needs if you're identified with that self. So we do this whole thing about needing to wake ourselves up from the trance of that story. So what's true about that is I wasn't born to be alone. I came here to love and be loved, and I have the power to learn how to root down love and make a home of it. And what I don't know, I can ask Christine about, or I can ask Katherine about. I can read books. I can watch YouTube videos. I can learn these new skills on how to navigate relationships in a way that's healthy and going to be able to meet my deepest needs as I meet the others, as I learn how to meet others' needs and create safety for them. So we spend a lot of time just working on that relationship to ourselves as the foundation for then being able to navigate healthy relationships with others. So secure attachment, we first create secure attachment within ourselves.
Yes, yes.
Yes, right. And then in this particular work, which I'm very full with it because we just created a course recently and did a course on this. Which we also have available digitally for people who are interested. But we go down to what I call the 4 healthy habits then of the happily attached. And what are those?
Let's hear what
people with healthy attachment do. Yeah. You know, what are the things that people who were raised knowing that they were loved, that they were safe, they didn't have traumas where someone died or someone left or someone was chronically incapable of caring for them, which gave you a self sense that somehow you were not safe in this world. You were not safe to need anybody. So if someone grew up in a home where they had parents who delighted in caring for them, who were lit up when they walked in a room, who went out of their way to make sure that they felt heard and seen and mirrored and all of that, you know, those lucky people who probably aren't here because they just already have thriving relationships without working too hard on it, right? So the first one is that they assume the best of others. They assume that others will like them, that others will care about them, that others are interested in their needs, that others will be there for them when they reach out. And if so we start to really unpack, where do I go in a moment where I'm disappointed? Well, I go, see, no one's ever going to show up for me. How old is that part of me? What might be more true? Well, the truth is, as an adult, you might say, people tend to show up for me to the extent that I show up for myself. Or I don't really know who's capable of showing up for me until I give them an opportunity, and then I can assess their level of development. Not about me, might be about them. So so there's a whole practice around how do we assume the best about others. And that comes in too with our healthy needs and the healthy sense of entitlement to get our needs met. That of course others might care about my feelings and about my needs if I only took the opportunity to share them in a way that assumes that other people would care. You know, there's sometimes when people are saying, you know, I'm learning how to, you know, deconstruct my walls because I've had all these walls up because I haven't felt safe. You don't want to just deconstruct the wall and then just go into relationship asking, you know, others to get your needs met, because you have to first decipher what's my projection onto other people. There's a reason you had the wall up, because there's a projection inside the I'm not safe narrative that other people have ill intent, other people will use me, other people will hurt me. So if you're asking somebody just even a neutral question, please pass the salt, but through that filter, it's going to come out like, I want the salt too, you know. And that will then, you know, bring out the worst in other people. And then others will validate the I'm not safe, others will hurt me narrative. So we really want to start being more conscious of what we're assuming about other people and begin to do the underlying work of the adult work of saying, well, what's actually true about that? We have to bring in wisdom. And we have to bring in the learning, you know, what Christine and her husband are doing all the time, where they're teaching all of these skills. The second one is that when connection is missing, those with secure attachment will tend to put relationship enhancement above self-protection. That's a really important distinction, because those of us who have wounded attachment and are bringing that into the present will put self-protection above relationship enhancement. So the second key has to do with creating connection when connection is compromised or connection is missing. So when somebody hurts your feelings, when somebody disappoints you, rather than just kind of retreating, closing your heart, pushing that person away, putting up a wall, judging that person, you might pick up the phone and you might say, look, you're a really important friend to me, and I really care about our relationship, and I want to work through what just happened because my feelings are hurt and I don't want it to create more distance between us. Can we talk about this? Right? It's almost like these practices are your decision. Are you going to go left or right at the fork of the road? It will create a whole different future in the relationship. People feel it. I mean, you're an energy worker, Christine. People feel it when we distance from them. Oh, I'm being dismissed now. Okay, I'm not safe over there. I'm not loved. People tend to not like us when we don't like them.
Yes.
That's just... So for those of us who are rejection sensitive, just notice that we have a tendency to reject first. And then people feel like we don't like them. And then they fulfill our projection that they're going to reject us. So this is, self as source is not for the faint of heart. We're no longer in a, my mother hurt me and that's why I am the way that I am. We want to graduate from, okay, now I understand why I am the way I am. We want to graduate from that conversation and really move into the adult conversation. But how would I like to be? And what would I hope for my relationships to be? What am I willing to be accountable for in how I show up? What's the future I'm building? Because the past doesn't determine how relationships go for us. It's actually the future that we're standing for. So the third one has to do with empathy. And I think that most of us think about empathy in terms of that I feel a sense of compassion for another person. And I like that definition. But Stephen Covey actually invited us to go deeper, where he talked about empathy as the experience of being in something together. And that experience, like the we experience, for someone who has attachment issues, the development that needs to happen first is our capacity to differentiate ourselves from the other person, so that that's not a merging. That's not a chameleon behavior where you're self-abandoning and you're just going into someone's world, which a lot of us are very good at. We learned how to do that really well. So it's more the quality of witnessing another person with the assuming the best of that other person, and just giving them the experience of being heard and being seen inside of what matters most to them, what they're up to. So I'm going to call that true empathy. And it really depends upon our capacity to witness another and be fully present with another in their experience, while also staying centered in ourselves. And the teacher that I love, who teaches so beautifully about witnessing and growing that capacity, is a woman named Polly Young Eisendrath, who wrote the wonderful book, Love Between Equals. So she's one of my favorite relationship teachers out there. And then the fourth healthy habit that we've distinguished has to do with caring about our impact on others. We were all kind of raised with the ideal, or let's say the value system of finding our voice and fully expressing ourselves. But Terrence Real kind of puts a little constraint on that. He talks about Self-expression, unbridled self-expression is actually potentially very damaging to relationships. Doesn't mean we're lying, but we have to get that sometimes we do and say things that are hurtful to other people and compromises the relationship quite severely. So learning how to clear the air by actually genuinely caring about the impact of our behavior, our choices, our actions or non-actions on another, whether we agree or not, is really key to keeping a clear field. So in the moment when somebody says, ouch, you stepped on my toes, we might say, have an impulse to say, explain ourselves, for example. Well, I only did that because my father always stepped on my mother's toes. And that's all I really know is that people step on each other's toes. That's how love was experienced in my family. So that did nothing to the relational field other than create more mistrust, because now the other person knows you're going to do it again because there's no self-responsibility. You're just kind of explaining why you are the way that you are and making a case for that. Another thing that we might do is argue because we think that it's ridiculous that the other person would even assert such a thing. What are you talking about? I'm not even in the same room as you. How could I have possibly stepped on your toes? You're crazy. As opposed to what actually clears the field. And if you're really loving someone, you really do get that people are in very different worldviews. And as Terrence Real says, I just read his book, so I'm filled with this wonderful pearls of wisdom. Reality, what does he say? Objective reality has no place in intimate relationships. So that was adorable. Like, thank you. You can't get into who's right, who's wrong. It's such a deflection. In that moment, someone's telling you their feelings are hurt, whether they made it up or not, whether you meant to or not. You want to be interested that their feelings are hurt. You would say, oh, okay, how did I do that? Please tell me, how did I do that? Wow, honey, I just see that you're really crushed by that or you're really hurt. So you mirror them back. You can say, I'm sorry, but the apology is not going to really complete it. You want to have empathy for what they're experiencing. You want to mirror back as much as you possibly can tolerate. Well, I can see how upset you are about that. I really got it. And then you want to make an amends moving forward. I will be much more conscious of that moving forward. I had no, not in my wildest dreams would I have thought that that would hurt you. Be much more conscious about that. So there's skill building, Christine, that we can do. And if you've had, patterns of in, out, up, down, heartache after heartache, you could look at it through an attachment lens, which is why I did this program, this particular program, inside of an attachment lens, because we're all so very savvy, but we don't really know how to evolve beyond it. So I thought that that was really missing for us. And again, as a service, because I think both of us come from service, once you find your way a little bit, you want to share that with others. So these 4 things can really radically begin to transform how relationships are for you, and begin to create a more solid foundation for love to take root. And I think it's critical that we actually begin to do this for each other. All of us are living in a world that is very topsy-turvy and very unsettling. And we need to be our best selves and our most creative selves to begin to rise to the occasion. And we best do that with each other, because truthfully, the most safety we can ever count on in life is in our loving relationships with each other. So to master how to keep relationships safe is really, really critical, even now more than any other time.
Oh, it's so true. What a wonderful roadmap that you created on your own journey of calling in the one and then graduating. And I just so appreciate what you were saying about conscious uncoupling and how important it is that we lift shame around that. And it really is just a relationship served its purpose. And then learning about how to keep love strong, over longevity with another person. And what you're sharing here about attachment, It is so important. It truly changes how we relate to ourselves and one another, and it spills over. And this roadmap that you have laid out for us, it's a mirror. Like starting off with like seeing someone's best. It's so true what that brings out in us with the world that we get to enjoy when we get to really see the best in each other. And I appreciate your compassion of like going to those parts of us that are just scared to do so. And when we can really reorient to seeing the best in other people, how it changes them. Because in relationships, we tend to not want to give our best if someone's just continually seeing us for our worst intentions or assuming the worst in us. So all of these, truly being with one another in our experiences, sincerely caring about each other. Anyway, those are so many gems that apply to all of our relationships, really, and that prioritizing connection over other things. So really so deeply lovely. And I'm wondering, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that and for studying, again, all of these different chapters of relating through the spectrum. So while you're here in our final moments, just to touch on calling in the one and conscious uncoupling. So I add all of this around attachment. I affirm, a zillion % on how I would just recommend anybody. And I'm wondering, are there any of your favorite things that you wish everybody knew? If someone wants to call in the one, like if you had one thing that you wish they knew, or a couple is kind of considering, divorce or separation, what do you like, the one thing you wish that they knew?
Well, I don't know if it's one thing, truthfully.
That's such a tough question.
But I mean, if I was going to choose one thing, I'd talk about, being able to stand for an unpredictable, unprecedented future, and to begin to be future focused. And also, in addition, because so many of us are now top heavy with looking back, and there's, so much great work that's happening around trauma, just to educate us around trauma. And I have so much respect for those teachers. And it is the future that we're standing for that begins to lift us to a new sense of self. The work that I just shared with you was created in relationship to conscious uncoupling because I wanted to prevent unnecessary breakups or premature breakups. And also, I wanted to build on what conscious uncoupling actually does for us, because in a way, conscious uncoupling liberates us from the past. Most of us who've had bad breakups recognize that there is some residue that can stay with us. And for some of us, if we have been stuck with kind of a certain narrative in response to how we've been treated, like I'm not wanted in response to being rejected, or the I'm alone, no one will ever show up for me narrative in response to someone not choosing you and coming through, or if you were in an abusive relationship, which had even emotional violence, the tenderness around it's not safe to be close to someone. These kinds of narratives, if they're not cleared, can dictate what's possible for you in love moving forward for many, many years to come. I think that breakups are actually a crossroads, and many will go on to live a lesser life in the aftermath of a disappointment in love. So conscious uncoupling, what I was able to do was to create these 5 steps that not only liberate us and kind of elevate the possible future that is now not just possible, but even predictable moving forward, if you're able to do a breakup and use the breakup to really grow your capacity to love and be loved, and to harvest the lessons learned and the wisdom gained, hard won, really by the losses that you've suffered. And so you're making new meaning of the breakup. And to be able to use each of the steps to grow the capacities and probably skills that you were missing in the relationship. I've had a lot of people do conscious uncoupling and then go back and say, I wish I had done this when I was in the relationship, because I would have known how to navigate it differently and I'd still be with that person. So that's why I can always promise people that they're going to have deeper love on the other side of it, because step one, we're learning how to hold and contain our own inner experience, how to recognize our feelings, how to recognize our needs, how to stand for ourselves, how to use negative emotions as the fuel for positive change. And step two, we're working with how do I take responsibility for my part in a breakdown in a way that really catapults my development forward and causes me to really trust myself to go into new love again. In step three, we're working with that underlying belief system that keeps showing up again and again. I call it your source fracture story, the original break in your heart, how to graduate from that story, how to begin to show up differently in life, how to clean up any of the residue that you're carrying from a former relationship, really by having what I call a soul-to-soul meditation, where you're bringing that person's soul in and you're actually dialoguing in a way that has you restored to your own sense of self-respect and dignity. So you're cleaning up the field. And then 4 and 5, how to deal with that person, particularly if you have children, in an ongoing way where you're clearing the residue, you're aligning on a new shared future, you're up-leveling the agreements between yourself and that person, you're aligning your relational field with where you're going in a new form of family. So whether you want to be connected to that person or not, some of us need to be, some of us never have to be again, and that's fine too. But the way you hold that person in your heart is going to matter for you and your ability to move forward with a clear field for love, an open heart for love, trusting yourself to love and be loved. So you want to even maybe think of that person as just your dark guru, that person who is in to serve your soul's evolution. So we want to be clean and clear to go into love. And a lot of calling in the one is about clearing the past away. So we're no longer kind of tap dancing around that or trying to get new people to fix that or compensate for that. And we're learning how to create from the highest possibility that we hold for true love, which is really what our hearts are so hungry for.
Yes. Oh, so good. And just this underlying theme of certainly we want to go into the past in a way that heals and clears and updates our beliefs and ways of responding, and that we create this empowering meaning around it. And I hear your invitation for everyone to also be forward focused, where all of the unbound possibilities are yet unwritten. And whether that is calling in the one, or when you're in relationship, wanting to create this conscious, thriving relationship, or, two couples that are choosing to uncouple, to be inspired by the next vision of what's ahead and not to be just focus on the past. I know we see that with couples a lot. If they're only rehashing the past, we become even more of that. We over-identify with that, and it's hard to grow into the person that we're becoming. So I love this. That is such a wonderful nugget that I think applies to us in every area of our individual lives and in partnership, is to make sure that we're really feeding the vision in an inspiring way that kind of calls us forward and upward. So thanks for sharing that. And so we are on the Thriving Relationship Show. So I'd love to ask people, what is a thriving relationship to you in a few sentences? Like, what is the essence of that to you?
Oh, I think it's co-creative, it's dynamic and alive. It's, when we get into relationship, we get engaged, we get married. It's just the context, it's the frame, and now we get to create it. And so to always look for the opening towards love, towards a deepening of understanding, towards greater health and vitality in the field. It really does kind of push on us to grow our capacities and our skills in the direction that would allow us to have that kind of alive, dynamic, loving, co-creative, mutually joyful experience.
So good. Thank you so much for that. And how about people that want to learn more? Be sure to check out links below. Guide us to, depending on where somebody is on their relationship journey, how can they learn more, learn from you, and just get to collect more of this incredible wisdom that you have to share?
Well, the timing is great to just invite everyone to join us for a free workshop that we're doing in our community. We do a lot of free things. And this one is the art of conscious completion. And it's really the three keys, the three mistakes we're making. That's what I'm going to give you 3 keys to how to not make those mistakes. But really naming the mistakes that most of us make when we're going through a breakup that steal joy and prevent future love. So we are doing that in May, and we'd love to have you join us for that. Otherwise, KatherineWoodwardThomas.com. That Art of Conscious Completion is on the ConsciousUncoupling.com website. And if you just go there, you'll find a way to find that. ConsciousUncoupling.com/Art of Conscious Completion.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for the welcome to those. Again, check those out below, all the links. And is there anything else that you are inspired that's on your heart that you would love to share with those who are tuning in?
I just want to encourage people to recognize that, you're not stuck with whatever patterns you've been struggling with, that there is a way to evolve beyond them. And one of the things you can do to begin that journey is to really have the courage to look at the future you're wanting to create, and to even begin to imagine that future is already fulfilled. And ask yourself, what does it feel like to be living inside of this future fulfilled? What does it sound like and smell like and taste like? And then just open to the universe and ask the universe, what will I need to give up in order to manifest this? What will I need to now embrace? How can I grow myself in order to be ready to receive it? And what is my next step? And go right into create that possible future.
Oh, fabulous. Everyone rewind, write down those questions, envision, what your heart desires. And those are perfect reflections that will reveal, I'm sure, so many insights. Thank you for leaving us with that. Katherine, you are truly just a fountain of inspiration and illumination and invitations for us to look deeper into whatever may be holding us back, that's standing in the way of what we really want, and how to dare to dream of the kind of love and connection and wholeness that we want to experience inside and out. So thank you so much for who you are, what you embody. Blessings to you and your beloved on your journey. And I'm just so grateful. And thank you all so much for tuning in and just being a part of Team Love. Blessings upon blessings to everyone. Thank you, Katherine. And we'll see you next time on the Thriving Relationship Show. Want more support for your relationship, or want to become trained as a certified relationship coach to help other couples? We warmly welcome you to head on over to centerthrive.com. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you next time on the Thriving Relationship Show.